This afternoon, we are honored to welcome David Brooks to Princeton Theological Seminary. I am especially pleased that he's joined us at the seminary today because he has much to teach us about the import of what we do here as a school of theology and what it has to do with our civil life. We talk a great deal here at the seminary about what it means to be a community that shares life together, a community that is grounded in a covenant. And David Brooks reminds us that this has implications not just for what we do here, but for our nation and our world. Please join me in welcoming Mr. David Brooks.
It's a pleasure to be back at Princeton. I've never quite had this effect. No, it is a pleasure to be back here. I came to Princeton and spent a long time at the main university doing a piece called The Organization Kid, looking into the souls of the students there and finding busyness and sort of a lack of spiritual preparedness. Now, people who know me know that I'm not naturally a spiritual person. The story I often tell is that when I was 5, my parents took me to a be-in in Central Park, hippies sort of thing, and they lit a garbage can on fire and they threw their wallets into it to demonstrate their liberation from money and material things. And I was 5 and I saw a $5 bill on fire burning, so I broke from the crowd, reached into the fire and grabbed the money and ran away. And that was my first step over to the right. And now my job is a conservative columnist at the New York Times, a job I liken to being the chief rabbi at Mecca, which is not always a lot of company there. But then there are moments when spirituality does come into life, and you begin to see things a little more with a moral lens. And so the soul sort of swells out at such moments. And I get other moments like that through life. One of the things we do is we go on Thursday nights to a dinner in Washington. I wrote about this in a column recently. We have friends named Kathy and David who had a kid in the DC public schools, and then this kid knew a friend, and that kid had no dad really present in his life. His mom had some health and drug issues, so he had no food at home and nowhere to sleep. And so he came over to Kathy and David's house, and they said, well, just, you can sleep here when you need to, and you can eat here. And that kid had a friend, and that kid had a friend, and that kid had a friend. And now when you go to Kathy and David's house, there are 15, 20, sometimes 25 kids sleeping, eating, having a second home, and in some cases their real home. And that is quite a great blessing. And I have a friend named Bill Milliken who's been working with youth for 50 years. He said he's asked which youth programs turn around lives. And he said, I've been doing this for 50 years, I've never seen a program turn around a life. The only thing that turns around a life is a relationship, and some sort of loving relationship. And Emerson said souls are not saved in bundles, they're saved one by one. And so I mention these because they are about intimacy, and they're about covenant, the promises we make to each other and having those intimate relationships with a sense of solidarity. And they're the sort of intimacy that happens outside a utilitarian arrangement. We have to use a moral lens in a culture that's too utilitarian. We have to become more emotional in a culture that's too cognitive. And the public discourse, the business I'm in, is over-politicized and under-moralized. That we talk too much about the jibs and jabs of polls, and we don't talk enough about how to make use of suffering, how to find meaning in life, what grace means, what redemption means. We don't even have that moral vocabulary of what the word sin means. And so my own personal calling, but I think it's a shared calling with a lot of people here, is to try to at least shift the culture a little over into moral discourse again, and to reintroduce concepts like sin and redemption and grace into the public conversation, because without those concepts, without the vocabulary, it's very hard to even know how to talk about spiritual, moral matters.